So just to let you know, I really did pretty much finish this season, but Gayle reached out, which was a very high moment for me. And Gayle says, okay, I'll do this. I'll do the podcast. I'll record with you. And I'm like, yes. So even though it's been a few weeks, I don't care. We're back. And I have Gayle Kirschenbaum with me. If you do not know who she is, you're going to hear about her right now. You are going to be impressed. I was telling her before we got started that she's a hero, and you're going to understand exactly what I mean by that when she shares her story of what really went viral, what it's like, what her life is like, and then we'll get into her book also besides. So Gayle, I'm going to stop talking, Gayle, and you're going to do the rest. Go ahead.
Wait a minute. What? Let's back up. Why didn't you tell people how you found me?
Oh, yes. Okay. That's a great idea. See, I love it. Gayle's taking over. Go, Gayle. Okay. So I
am a storyteller.
Yes. So I was on Instagram and this video popped up of Gayle telling her snippet of her story of where she discusses her relationship with her mom and how she repaired this estranged relationship that she had. And through strong, meaningful forgiveness, has a powerful, amazing, rekindled relationship with her mom to this day. I find that it's not only the importance of forgiveness, Gayle, it's also important that it's never too late. A lot of times I think we tell ourselves it's too late, too much water under the bridge. I can't go back there. What you're demonstrating to the people, to audiences, to the world, it's never too late to mend, fix, repair, return back to important relationships. How'd I do?
Yes. And so for me, it's not even a rekindle because we had a horrible relationship from the minute she gave birth to me and found out she gave birth to Gayle and not Gary. And more or less life was horrible for me. Not just growing up through adult life, it continued on for decades. So the bullying, the abuse, and in fact, my brothers joined in because they were trained as young. They're older. One is deceased, unfortunately, now. But, they were like my mom's bouncers. You grab your sister, you hold her down, you do this to her, you put her on the refrigerator. So they weren't raised to look at your cute little sister. It was more, I was like in the way, I was to be handled, to be removed, to be controlled. So, and I also came out of the womb extremely sensitive, super sensitive, which I say for creative people, that's great. We tend to be very sensitive. Everyday life is tough because we feel and see a lot more than people who are not. So I also feel I came in as an old soul into a family of new souls. I don't know if you believe that or not, because the good news is, as I was being attacked in every way, I realized it wasn't me. It was that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just existed. And I realized under age 5, because I remember having these thoughts when we lived in the first house I lived in before we moved, that you need to go back to somebody's past, and I used to try to get my uncle, my mother's brother, to answer questions. What was mommy like when she was little? What happened in her childhood? What happened in your childhood? But they're the secret generations. Just so your audience knows this, I'm 70. I'll be 71 this year. And my mom is going to be 102 in just a few weeks, in less than a month. So just so you know, generational where we are. Anyway, so funny. I'm just thinking my mother, who's criticized me for decades, wanted me to bob my nose, which I didn't. She was having my curly hair straightened since second grade. When I was on the Today Show 22 years ago, the first time for a movie I made, her first comment was, "You sound too Jewish. You have to go to elocution classes." Now she looks at me and tells people, "Look, no plastic surgery." So it's very funny. Anyway, I just want to cut to the chase, so to speak. So it was pretty bad. I made a movie called Look at Us Now, Mother. I did a TED Talk that I was asked to do, which is called No More Drama with Mama. And I start both with, did you ever feel like you were born into the wrong family? It's like I landed in enemy territory.
Mm.
And people ask, well, what about your father? Well, he himself was struggling because he had been abused by his father, who was a tyrant, and he was the target of his father's rage. And then he marries a woman who's, my mom's definitely on the narcissistic spectrum
Mm.
and didn't give him that love and attention he needed and was dismissed frequently. So that just pushed his rage button. So he was just, in bed, doctoring himself. I think hypochondria is a lot of wanting to have attention when you're not getting it. So no, I was on my own battling this. And so since you know my age, you know the period. So I was the hippie period, the artsy period. And of course, as a creative, I was in that world, which drove her crazy. But the social worker said, Gayle, you have to get out of your house.
Mm.
And if I had courage, I probably would have run away, but I didn't. But I did manage to get out of high school early. I went to my principal and said, how do I get out early? And I just doubled up on requirements, English and math. I think the last science I ever studied was high school chemistry. And I was always an artist, so I was always drawing. And so I had a portfolio, and I got into Binghamton, which is a state
Mm.
university in New York. And I was just at the end of my 16th year. So the good news, I was 200 miles away, and that was a very big step for me. I teach forgiveness, and I have my steps to teaching forgiveness, and I'm going to be launching a whole other program, and I do workshops, etc. And this is just, I kind of ended up in wellness by accident due to my own story. But the turning point for me was I ended up, I had a 12-year career in New York. I was a designer. I was fiercely independent. I mean, my mother, of course, when you are being raised and controlled constantly, the last thing you want is to be controlled. I'm paying for that. You do what I want. So I worked many jobs and didn't want anything to be paid for. And also what they wanted to pay for wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to study the arts. She wanted me to be a teacher. And I picked this school that didn't have an education department. It would have been nice to have the pension now, but anyway, long and short of it is I ended up, after a 12-year working as a creative in advertising and other things in New York, I went out to LA and I started my life over at 32 and went into TV. And definitely had beginner's luck. I got into the PBS affiliate and was nominated for 2 Emmys for my first films and won one. But I was among my people in the doc world. I felt smart, wanting to do good things. I'd been in advertising, tons of money, but it wasn't filling my soul. Anyway, so I was having great career success. And it was like I had these two lives. I would be, one day I'm on stage winning an Emmy, featured all over the media. And then I fly back to New York to see my family, and it's constant,
Mm.
one belittling, criticism after the next, just bullying. And it continued on even with my brothers, even though they became professionals, one became, they did what they were supposed to. One became a doctor, one became a lawyer, and they married at 21, the nice Jewish, they did everything they were supposed to do, as my brother was saying, which I do want to share in a second. And when I hit middle age, I said, I can't keep going like this, because every time I'd come home and it was this constant, bullying, I was, it was like scapegoat here, victim here.
Mm.
I would recoil, I would give it back. I was just so affected by it. And I would fly home to California and I'd have to like recover. And, people who knew me, my friends all said, just cut it off with them. I would just, they're so toxic. Just, why do you even want them in your lives? And I knew I didn't want to do that. I always knew I didn't want to do that. And believe me, I have cried many tears, not just from my mother, from my brothers too, from what they've done. Things that they did that I wouldn't do to an enemy, that they did to me. And again, I went to other people, cut it off, cut it off, cut it off. And I just knew I didn't want to do it, because that would mean they won. I knew I had to figure out the secret. I knew we can't change anyone. We only have control over ourselves, but we do have impact over other people by how we respond to them.
Mm.
So I knew that I would have to figure out how to forgive. Because I knew if I can get to a place where I can forgive them, then I would not be reacting to the criticisms. I would respond differently. I would let it roll off of me. I'm going to tell you about that secret in a second, but I just want to, before I forget,
Okay.
when my brother was dying and he died a horrible death. I mean, cancer is a horrible disease, and he was very type AAA, and we never had a good relationship my whole life. And by the way, it sort of gets passed on to the next generation. Um, I sort of dedicated that summer to be out there to help if they needed me, even though I was never really part of his life. And I remember being there, and he said to me, he could barely talk. It's like when you're so sick and weak and
Mm.
death is on your doorstep, you don't talk like this. But he said, I'm very jealous of you. And I thought, my knee jerk reaction was, oh, because I'm healthy, I don't have cancer ravishing my body, and he's dying from it. It's taken over his body. So my reaction was, if I wish I had a magic wand and I would put it over your head and lift the cancer out of you. And he said, that's not it. What do you think he said to me? Now, mind you, he had built a big law firm, had tragically his wife of many years passed. He found love again. He was remarried, he has children, grandchildren, all the luxuries in life, the material luxuries in life. He didn't want for anything. So what do you think he said to me?
You want me to guess?
Yes.
I'll guess. I'm going to guess. Okay. So, Gail, I think he probably was jealous of your level of forgiveness, that you were able to be present for him after everything he's done to you.
That's a good guess, but that wasn't it.
Okay.
I don't even think he was aware of my level of forgiveness.
Right.
He said, because I live my life as a free spirit.
Mm.
I never married. I didn't have children. None of that was intentional. But I do want to talk about forgiveness, but I want to just wrap up on my brother. But I never felt, I always did what I wanted to do, I never, it was terrible because he was brilliant. He was probably the smartest of the three of us. And, he fell into an area of law that wasn't very good for, in many ways. And he was putting liens on people's houses, and he could have done anything else in law or done anything else he wanted. So I felt really sad. And that was the first time I realized my brother was trapped. He bought the script. He bought what, my mother told him he needs to be and do. He was pre-med and he was feigning in the lab. So he switched to the other acceptable career, which was law. So I don't know what he would have wanted to do had he not done what he was told to do. And so my mom, they couldn't control me. Actually, one of the therapists in my film and in my book, Dr. Pamela Thompson, who's brilliant. And, we're doing a book launch. So we're going to, in New York. Where are you based, by the way?
Right now, I happen to be in Israel, believe it or
Oh,
not.
my God. Wow.
Yes.
Is that where you live?
I just moved here.
Oh, my.
Yes,
Wow.
I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I
Yeah.
raised all my kids in Passaic, New Jersey, and
Wow.
I just moved here 3 weeks ago.
Wow. In Jerusalem?
Right outside Jerusalem right now. Yes.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Where are many of your listeners located?
All over. I would say mainly the tri-state area, probably.
Okay, good. Because then they can come, if they're around,
Yes.
they can come to the book launches. Because Dr. Pamela Thompson is flying up for the first launch, and she's brilliant. But she said that essentially I was like a misfit for my family, that they didn't know what to do with me. Because I came in as a very curious person, with tons of energy, and I couldn't be controlled from early on. I couldn't be controlled. So you want to hear about forgiveness? You want to ask me some questions? You want to hear
Yeah,
what are you?
but before you get to the forgiveness, if I could touch on some of the things that you
Sure.
said, like you had said that you never got married or had children. Do you think I know you're saying you were a free spirit and so you wanted to do what you wanted to do, but do you think it had any aspect of your upbringing and the abuse that you went through? Do you think perhaps you had fears or that you perhaps were distanced from getting close to somebody or nervous about having that type of family. Maybe is that something that was involved in your thinking or subconscious
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah. So, yes. You know, people, when I get on stage and I talk to people, and lots of people, they all go, "Oh, you seem so confident," considering, when they hear what I went through. And I say, well, the confidence is because I knew it wasn't me. I knew all the things I was being criticized about from head to toe, and whatever wasn't, it was not me. I was fine with all these things. It took a lot of work to keep my nose, and I was never going to change it. But the scars do run deep, because probably at age 12, I said, I'm never going to let anybody hurt me like this again.
Right.
And when you do that, you put up a wall. And yes, I had many wonderful relationships in my life, and I would love to find my shirt. And I feel I will. Right now, I'm so busy, as I've decided to make my mother my priority, and I am her full-time caregiver. I have a life in New York that I put on the shelf now. My loft is there. I'm not there. Friends stay when I'm not there. And I am here taking care of her. And then work. I'm trying to squeeze in to get some of my work done. I'm also so much looking for help if anybody's available. um, because we're building a movement, a forgiveness movement, and there's so much to do. But yes, so it is true. That is probably, I know a lot of women that very much wanted to have a child. And so when their biological time clock was going off and they were single, they kind of looked around and snagged someone who they thought would be a good donor. They married that donor, and it wasn't a good relationship. And I know many people who ended up divorced, and doing shared parenting. So I didn't have that drive that I need to be a parent. I had 3 pregnancies that were not planned, and they didn't last. I would have had for sure the last one. And I would have been a single parent. It wasn't meant to be. I wanted the relationship first. I really didn't want to be the single parent. Particularly as was living such an artist life, things are so unpredictable. It wasn't like I had the steady job and the steady income at the time. So, yeah, it would have been, I would have figured it out, but yeah.
I'm sure you now in you mentioned forgiveness, and before you get into forgiveness, it's such a powerful tool. I think forgiveness. There's a very famous story in the Bible, if I may share. Yeah, the Joseph story. So a lot of people know the Joseph story because of the Broadway show Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So
I didn't see it.
oh, you didn't see it? Okay. So Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery, and there he is in Egypt, and he becomes the viceroy of Egypt in the end. And the brothers thought he died. These are all Jacob's sons, and there's a famine in the land, and Jacob sends his other sons to go purchase food in Egypt. Everyone thinks Joseph is dead. Many years have gone by. It's about, if I would have to guess exactly, it's probably a good 20 years have gone by. They come to Egypt, and there are the brothers, and they don't recognize that Joseph is the viceroy, but Joseph recognizes them. And he puts them through a few different tests. They go, they come back, they go. And in the end, he sees that the brothers have learned to take care for Joseph's youngest brother, because they both shared the mother. And he was very impressed with their form of repentance, I guess. And he gets so emotional, he can't take it anymore. And he just reveals who he is. And he says, "It's me, Joseph." And then he says, is my father still alive? Is Jacob still alive? And they're shocked. They don't know what to do with that. And so they're so nervous that Joseph is going to lash back at them, get angry with them. And he responds in the most beautiful, poetic, most forgiving learning life lesson that anyone could learn. Joseph says, "It's not you that put me here, but it's God. This was God tended."
Right.
and don't take the blame for whatever has happened or transpired in my life. This was meant to happen. This was the journey I was meant to be on, and I don't want you to take blame, responsibility, feel the sense of guilt or shame. He says, I am where I'm supposed to be. It's one of the most powerful storylines I find. It's one of my favorite storylines. And I myself have had a forgiveness episode where I was abused as a young girl, and I had confronted my abuser a few years ago, and I said, like, you never said you're sorry. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, I just wanted to hear a sorry. I don't know why I wanted to hear that. We want to hear this. I don't know. Not that. So the person said they were sorry, and then they went into, I feel so bad that perhaps you went through divorce number one, perhaps you went through divorce number two. Maybe I was to blame for things I did to you, that you have the life that you've had. And I pulled up my Joseph, genes, so to speak. And I said, don't take the blame. I have a beautiful life, and this is the life I was meant to lead. I'm a beautiful mom, 6 beautiful children, have grandchildren now. I have a beautiful career, and this is what my life was meant to be. And please don't take, and I forgive you. And it was a beautiful moment, because I really meant it. I truly meant it. And when somebody really means from the deepest of their soul that they forgive another human being who's deeply hurt us, and doesn't look to blame at any aspect of their life on their circumstances or other people, and they embrace, or there's a person says, they embrace the space that they're in and know that they're meant to be there, that's power.
Exactly.
And I would love to hear how it transpired for you. I'd love to hear it from your vantage point, from your perspective. What was the impetus that you decided that this is it? I'm gonna forgive. How did the conversation go? What was it like? Could you take us through it?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to comment on the word blame, because if you look at blame, it's like be lame. Blaming takes our power away. There's no point to blame anybody. And the other thing, when the Joseph story made me think of, I always say that the obstacles of my childhood were the biggest opportunity of my life.
Right.
Because of these obstacles, I did figure out the secret to finding forgiveness. I would have, and now I can help so many people, and I have this power. It does make you like a superwoman, a super person, because when you know how to forgive, suddenly you're not in this place of being hurt constantly, because you can turn it around. So for me, it wasn't about, everybody wants to hear, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this, the acknowledgement and the apology.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I knew I wasn't going to get it. I didn't even go seeking for it, because, frequently they're not even aware of what they're doing or what their impact they've had on you. So it's kind of like getting angry at a blind person for not driving a race car. So, how can you get angry at someone who doesn't have the skill set or the ability to do what you want them to do? So I knew I had to do the work. I knew I had to figure out how to find forgiveness. It has nothing to do with the other person. That's what I tell people all the time. You don't wait for a sorry. You don't wait for an acknowledgement. You don't wait for any of that. You do the work, because it's not about the other person. It's about you. It's about freeing yourself, because it only hurts us. When we hang on to that anger and resentment, it hurts us. I mean, there's so many, you just can, Google, and you hear all the expressions. Is like, you're taking the poison, or you have the leash around the collar around your neck with the leash, and they have control and they're yanking it, and all this is true, So how do you cut the leash? How do you liberate yourself? So I realized, and I realized really in my very young single digits, that you need to understand a person, because they don't suddenly wake up out of nowhere and they're an abusive person, and they're abusing you. It comes from somewhere. And first of all, and also, there is generational trauma, right? We're all impacted, even when we're just the fetus, epigenetics, when we're just growing inside somebody's stomach, we are impacted by their trauma. And that's why when I was really young, like super young, honestly, my very first thoughts was, well, I had a Cinderella complex. I felt like the slave in the family, and I watched my brothers being loved and adored, and I was, quite the reverse. So I thought my very early memories was I must be adopted. That's why I'm being treated. It's such differential treatment. So, and I have to be careful when I say that, because I have women friends that didn't marry and have biological children, but wanted to be mothers, and they adopted, and they're the most loving mothers there are. So, but I'm talking in the 50s now, and a little girl of 4, and those are my thoughts. And then I remember telling my grandmother that I know I'm adopted and don't tell anyone. And she thought it was so funny. She told everyone. So when I found out that in fact I was not, and I was a biological child, I had to figure out why. Why, why have I been treated the way I was being treated? And again, for decades. So I needed to know what happened to my mom and what happened in her past. And you'll read it in my book. Her standard answer is, I don't know, I don't remember. Every time I ask that question, I don't know, I don't remember. In fact, I joke with her, let's have a conversation and never say, I don't know, I don't remember, but she can't. It always comes up, because she is of the secret generation. They bury their emotions. They don't tell people things. So one of the many hardships, my mother had a lot of hardships in her childhood. Her father, due to economics, I guess after she's born in 23. They had a produce business in Brooklyn and Lorimar, and I guess there was a lot of financial problems. He was with his brothers, and he tried to take his life, not once, but twice, with gas. And so he ended up, who knows if the gas affected his brain cells? We think so. But he ended up more or less a depressed guy. And my grandmother had 3 children. She had a newborn infant after my mom. And she didn't have time to grieve or deal with emotions. Nothing's like that. You roll up your sleeves. It's all about practical. And she started a business, and that my grandfather really couldn't really help her with. So she had to make a living for her 3 children. And then if that wasn't enough, with a depressed, sidelined husband, her baby gets pneumonia. And I think the story goes that she used all her money for doctors, which was like $6,000 back then in the early 30s. And I remember, this is also in the book, they went out to Coney Island for the ocean air, thinking it would help, heal her, the air. And my mom says she was on the beach with her aunts when she saw this whole crowd gathering on the boardwalk. And she goes running through the people. She's a little kid herself of 7. And she sees this officer holding her sister who's dead and her mother crying. So she witnessed that, and then she has a blackout. When I go, how old were you? She doesn't know. She doesn't remember the funeral. She doesn't remember the Shiva. She doesn't remember any of this. And so I pieced together through tons of research from genealogy records. I started doing my genealogy in 82 when there was no computers and no internet. And I have interviews of people that are long dead. So that's really important. And documents I used to mail and get them in the mail then. But when I was tracing her young years, I saw that there were so many addresses for her 17 years of life. And I'm like, why did you move so much? She goes, because back then the landlord would give you, when you signed a lease, you got 3 months free rent. And my grandmother's trying to juggle everything and stretch the money so she could raise her children. So my grandmother's big line was, well, she always said, never hang out your dirty laundry. And then always, when you laugh, the world laughs with you. When you cry alone. So in my quest for information, I even found there was a paper in Brooklyn called the Brooklyn Eagle. Doesn't exist anymore, but through research, found an article. My grandfather had a stable. They housed horses, even Barnum and Bailey horses. And right before my mom's 7th birthday, it went up in flames. And I only know that from an article, from research, not because of her telling me. So they blocked it out. They don't remember, you know? And so I also, at the time, my mom, now nearing very close to 102, has outlived everyone. But when I was doing my research and working on the movie and the book, I found her two surviving first cousins and interviewed them. So they were filling in the holes of things also. So between documents I found, vital records I dug up, just a lot of research, I was able to put this narrative together. And then my mom did reveal my grandfather's attempted suicides. And and she talks about how in Brooklyn, maybe you know, because you're from Brooklyn, Kings County Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it still is, or it was like it was for people who had mental health issues or whatever. I don't know. But she tells a story. I didn't grow up in Brooklyn, so I don't know. But the family funeral home was in Brooklyn. But she ends up telling a story that she used to, as a little girl, sit in the waiting room, you know, as her mother would spend, you know, hours with her father, because then little, you know, children were not allowed into rooms back then. So it's like I suddenly saw this little girl that was cheated out of a childhood. She didn't have one. And she was not abused unlike me, because a lot of people ask me, well, was your mother abused by her mother? No, in fact, she was quite the opposite. Her mother was so protective over her and adored her. I said, did you have to do the dishes? I mean, I had to do everything in the house. And she says, no, I tell her I had a stomach ache and I never had to do it. So, and in fact, it's so funny. I don't know if did you go to yeshiva? Was that your education? Okay.
Yes.
So in public schools, at the end of, let's say, 6th grade and then junior high, we had these things called autograph books. They were these little, well, is it personal to ask how old you are?
I'm 51. You could ask.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, you could be my child. I would have been a young mother. So there are these zippered books, leather, and you'd open them, and there were all these blank pages. And when you graduated, let's say 6th grade, you give it to your friends, and they would write something to you about you. So I found my mom's autograph book, and my grandmother's best friend, who her name was Libby, I was named after. My middle name was after her, wrote in my mom's book, Fetch. Called her a Fetch. And I said, oh, I guess the fetching worked for you. You got out of your chores. So anyway, the long story short is that I started painting putting the narrative together of my mom's childhood. And I saw a very wounded little child. And I had a light bulb moment. Sometimes we have an experience and it's a light bulb moment, but we're not ready to deal with it. So it sort of stays there. You kind of cover it and put it in the back, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was living in LA in the 90s and I was doing my TV and doing great, but in the thick of the family, I was so wounded and being constantly wounded by my family. Okay. I met a woman who had a traumatic childhood, and in her healing, she became a facilitator of a forgiveness board game. And believe it or not, there are forgiveness board games. I spoke at the American Psychological Association, and there were all these board games there. Anyway, long and short of it is I ended up playing it. She invited me to play it. I played it with somebody else. I don't remember anything other than this one little moment. My piece landed somewhere on the board, and she said, stand up and close your eyes. I did. And now she says, imagine your mother as a little girl. I had already done that homework, and so I saw my mother as a wounded little girl. And then she says, now imagine yourself as a little girl. Well, I know that I was a wounded little girl. And then she said, now you two come together. And it was huge because she was no longer my mother. She was like me. I could feel her pain because I knew the pain. I had the pain. And so I had empathy for her. I didn't have hatred for her, which I grew up having a lot of hatred. I used to wish that plane would crash when she went on a holiday because then I would be free. And that's a horrible thought. But the fact that I wished it, you would know how much pain I was in. And I thought I would be free. If she wasn't here anymore, I would be free. I had my first flying dream when I was a little girl that she was coming after me, and I opened up the door to the basement, and I like put my arms out and I flew down, and she was trying to get my feet and trying to grab me. But my flying dreams thereafter, I'm just soaring and taking off, and it's my superpower that nobody knows I could fly. So anyway, back to forgiveness. So the first step is understanding your abuser, and that is to dig into their past as best as you could. Because believe me, there's a reason they're hurting you, okay? It doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with them, okay? But on your journey to forgive them, this is my method, okay? So now I saw her as a wounded child. And by doing that, I changed how I looked at her. So what gets us so upset in life is unfulfilled expectations. So when someone enters our life and they have a role in our life, a mother, a father, a brother, a spouse, a child, comes expectations. They have this role. And with it, it's like the whole list of the to-do list, what they should be doing, right? And when they don't follow those rules, when they don't do what that role they have in your life, they're not fulfilling it. Mother should be loving and nurturing when they're actually being the complete opposite. Well, that's a huge betrayal, right? And it's hard. It's hard to live with it. But now I didn't look at her like that. Yes, on paper, she was my mother. She birthed me, but she was another wounded child like I was. So this is what changed. I reframed how I looked at her. So when the constant criticisms came, they didn't have the impact on me anymore. And even though I have not had children, and you've had 6 and now grandchildren, mazel tov, when your little kid or any of your little kids looked up to you and they said, if they would say to you, Mommy, I don't love you anymore, what would you do? You wouldn't smack them in the face. You'd bend down and give them love because that's what they're really asking for, right? So when your mother says you're fat, you're stupid, you need to fix that, or this is wrong with you, they need love. Kill them with kindness. So when the criticisms continued, I just laughed them off because I saw her as a very hurt person. Remember, hurt people hurt people. When you are hurt, you hurt others. When we feel love, we give love. So as soon as I started not reacting the way I reacted, taking it in, which means they had power over me, instead, I just kind of dismissed it, laughed it off. I took their power away because they realized these comments, these abusive comments and the bullying was having zero impact on me. So it's like I took what is Superman's power? What is
I mean, the kryptonite, you took away
the kryptonite, right? The kryptonite away, right? I found the secret code. And so they stopped because it was having no impact. I want to share one thing. I was giving a workshop many years ago in New York, and it was focused on transforming difficult relationships. And so there were a lot of people that were in there talking about their toxic boss and work-related relationships. And, it was men and women. And, women are much more open to talk about their personal life than men are. And so it's funny, the men would talk about a toxic boss or a toxic client, and then at break, they come to me and they go on about their father. And, but the women were more open to talk about that during the workshop. And this one woman, absolutely beautiful. She was an actress. She was ingenue looking, gorgeous, super sensitive, gorgeous soul inside and out. And she said she had always been preyed on by her father. Her sister was not, but her father was always preying on her. And she was with her sister when her sister when she received another nasty text from her father, and her sister looked at it, and her sister said, just forget about him. He's a big baby in a diaper. And I thought that is an amazing image. And that is why the sister's not preyed upon. So it's always the most sensitive one who is preyed upon. When you look at children, and if there is a parent who's abusive, it's the sensitive one because they know they're going to have impact. We all want to have impact on others, right? Whether it's for good or for bad, right? We all want to influence other people. So if somebody dismisses you, you're not going to have impact on them, right? So what ended up happening, due to how I started to respond to my mother, not react, but respond really sort of dismissively and kind of laughing it off, the criticism stopped. And in the end, by doing that, and then I started showing her love and compassion, something I couldn't get to, I couldn't feel, because now to me, she was so desperate for attention and love, and she still is. I made her a celebrity. I knew she would love that. On social media. Granted, I had the material. I mean, I knew I was working with a woman who is really funny and really smart, and very not high on the emotional intelligence, but high otherwise, and gorgeous. That people were just going to identify and love her, and I started getting those videos out, telling her, oh, let's make a video on this or whatever. So, and she loves the attention. And I'm okay. She doesn't want to ever be upstaged. That's for sure. And one thing that's not a compliment for her is when people say I look like her. She does not like to hear that. So anyway, the movie poster for my film, which is taken from my brother's bar mitzvah picture from 1959, which I manipulated with my designer because it's really a story between a mother and daughter, and I was all of four. So I pulled us out in the foreground, and my brothers and father are sort of like blurred in the background. But she is a stunner, and she looked at it, and actually it was in 59. She had a big green satin dress, and I had a green satin sash, organdy dress that I was welted. I was always welted from it, but it didn't matter because as long as I looked good, that's what mattered. And my shoes were dyed green. She had even frosted her hair green. She was a woman. She's a real fashionista, ahead of her time to match her green dress. But do you know the movie? You might not know it, called Mommy Dearest. It's the Joan Crawford story.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So when it came out, she used to call me and go, hi, it's Mommy Dearest, like very proud of it. She even says in one of our therapy sessions, she once pulled a Mommy Dearest on me. Well, she pulled a lot of Mommy Dearests.
Right.
And so she always looks for that poster when she's out with people because she loves to show everyone how gorgeous she was when she was young.
You just hinted that you went to therapy with her.
Yeah, not very much. When I made the movie, I wanted to bring in therapy. I wanted to bring a therapist. I was trying to get the answers. I was doing lots of research. I asked other people to interview my mom, and it was the wall. And then I brought in two different therapists. So we just did very few sessions, but they were very, very helpful. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And how about with your brother? I know you said one is passed, but the one that you have one other brother that's,
I do.
and how's that?
This is tragic. I don't want to say anything because, both of my brothers were on the narcissistic spectrum. So it was three. Unfortunately, he is sick with Parkinson's. And, my mom before used to say there's no cancer in the family. Well, there was never even any Parkinson's. And he now sold his practice. He's 4 years older than I am. I just took them away on a cruise. I did a whole thing with another cruise ship, and the four of us, well, with his daughter, went on a cruise so we can all be together. But it's sad, it's just sad that he's suffering with this now, and sad my other brother didn't get to enjoy his life because he was a workaholic, and then he got sick and he died.
Yeah. Very painful. It's like you said, you're living despite everything.
Yeah, I mean, knock on wood, my mother always says there is no wealth without your health, and it's so important to be healthy. But I'm a very big one on mental health because if we have to take care of our mental health because that impacts our bodies. And my brother, who is not with us anymore, I didn't come up with this. I think it could be from the 12-step programs. I've never been in any of those, but I think so, which says you're as sick as your secrets. And
Mm,
he lived with tons of secrets and a lot of rage, a lot of rage. And that
mm,
all goes in our body. I mean, we're all born with, I think, these cancer cells in our bodies. And everything is just about creating the environment to let things grow.
right.
And the most important organ that we need to take care of is our brain. This
Yeah.
brain here sends messages through our bodies.
My ex mother-in-law used to say something. She's something about she says the most expensive real estate is your mind. Don't let anyone occupy it for free.
Well, exactly. And that's it. She was right on. When you're hanging on to that anger towards someone, they're in there for free because it's
Right.
only hurting you, it's not hurting them.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I feel so lucky that I did have the obstacles of my childhood, that I went on this quest to figure out the steps to finding forgiveness. And they apply to everyone. I always play psychological games. If I see somebody really off, I know there's something going on for them, right?
Mm.
Like years ago when we used to go to post offices, I remember standing on a long line in the post office. It must have been around Christmas time. And one of the postal workers was like going postal. And the entire line was dead quiet. It was like everybody's head was down. It was like they were going to a gas chamber or a guillotine or
Wow.
something. And I'm like, okay, what is going on in here? And then I looked up and I realized, okay, one of the postal workers was going like postal. And I said to myself, okay, now I have to get myself into his shoes. He's doing this, what do you call a job when you work for the government?
Service.
He's
Civil service. Civil
civil
service.
service job, right? He deals with the public all the time. Um, who knows? Everybody wants. It's all about that person, the customer. Nobody cares about him, right? They want this. They want it now. They're not happy to wait online, and who knows what's going on for him at home? You have no idea. But there's whatever's going on at home. If there's pressure there, it's magnified because look how busy this post office is, and there are people who probably just don't care. So he was losing it. So I made up my mind when I got up there, it was not going to be about me. It was going to be about him. Yes, I needed my stamps or whatever I was there for, but I was going to ask him about himself. And I was going to acknowledge that it's got to be tough, you know, on holidays or times like now and dealing with so many people. And he like turned on a dime. He looked at me and he thanked me. I remember when I left, he thanked me, and I walked out and I saw that line and I gave everybody like a wink because everyone was listening and observing. It's so amazing how we can turn people around. And I'll give you one more story. I got on a bus. This is many, many years ago. I was on my phone with, this is before AirPods came out, but anyway, with, the headset.
Right.
I was the first on the bus, and the next bus stop, two people came on. And I was on the phone with a friend. And I was sitting like the beginning of the back of the bus, where the back door is, like I was
Mm-hmm.
right behind it. Anyway, the guy who got on at the next stop, he wasn't with the woman. I mean, they just got on together. He starts carrying on, pointing to me. Look at that woman. What does she think she is? Pointing to me. What does she think? She owns this bus? How rude is she that, how rude I am that I'm on the phone. I'm in a public place and I'm on the phone. So I said to my friend, I have to call you back. And then I took my headset out and I said, you are absolutely right. I am so sorry. I didn't even realize that I was speaking loudly. And you're right. This was very rude of me. But by now, more and more people have gotten on the bus, right?
Right.
And we're having this little sort of confrontation where I'm just acknowledging what he accused me of and accepting it, and apologizing. And he then walks to me in the back of the bus. What do you do? What do you do? And I was making films, and he's an actor, and he's at the actor studio. And suddenly there's a love fest going on. The woman behind joins in. He's giving, this guy's anti-technology. He doesn't have a cell phone. He doesn't have printed cards. He has a handwritten, here, if you ever need actress, he gives me a thing with his phone number. Now, I could have taken that situation and done a F you, you don't own this bus. And if I want to talk on the phone, I'm going to talk on the phone. It is really so easy to turn people around. And I said it was my last story, but I have one final one. When my Mother movie played in the festival, it was in all the Jewish festivals. And I think this one was in Palm Beach Gardens or something. And the woman who ran it, her husband was helping her out. And he did not make the screening, but he came to my talk pack afterwards, where I talked about the power of kindness and showing love to other people, and how when people are hurt, they hurt other people, and to show kindness to people when they're not being kind. So long and short of it is, he came in the next day and he was looking for me. He couldn't wait to find me. He had to tell me a story. Big guy. And he goes, look, I just heard what you said. I didn't see the film. But I was out today. I was at the supermarket, and there was a woman that was going off. I mean, not just on me. She was just out of it, going off on everybody. And I remembered what you said, and I went over to her and I showed her kindness. And now his eyes well up, and he goes, you're not going to believe what she did. She hugged me and said, no one is ever kind to me. And I thought, wow, you know what? It's like, if all we could do is show kindness to each other. You know what I started after October 7th? Because after October 7th, it's brutal, and it's brutal in New York. And I am in a building where my mezuzah was ripped off twice pre-October 7th. My neighbor posted a swastika on a Israeli flag. Every bulletin board was saying boycott Israel. And, I had friends who were more or less turning, who I were either colleagues or otherwise, that I'm now part of the colonizers. And it was very hard for me. I always lived life with diversity. I've been known to have my own United Nations. And I just said, this is crazy. So I started something called Hug a Stranger a Day. And just started stopping people on the street, asking how did they feel about a hug, and seeing if they like hugging and if they would mind or want to make a video of it and put it on social media. And so I did. And it's, as I said, if you just give a hug to a person a day, you can change a person's day for sure.
Yes. It's so beautiful, so wonderful to speak to you. And I would love to end with the fact that the book launch, I know it's all about forgiveness. And I saw the posting, how you're doing it around the time of Yom Kippur.
Well, that's intentional, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I find it so beautiful. It is intentional for those who are listening. I have Jewish listeners and non-Jewish listeners. Yom Kippur is a day of we say judgment, but it's also really a day of forgiveness. And if people think I'm crazy, it's my favorite day. And if I may share the reason why it's my favorite day, when I was a teenager, I'm the youngest of four. And I always looked up at my older siblings as these angels, like perfect, they could do no wrong. And here I was, this teenager, younger than they were. And I felt like I was a typical teenager, rebellious a little bit, maybe did things I shouldn't have done, skipped school, said I was at place A and I was really at place B, and I was dishonest. And I remember I was in camp, and I was, my older sister says, you look so sad, Jordana, and you usually always have a smile. Why are you walking around sad, like the heaviness? I said, I did a lot of things and I feel really bad. I think I was like 16 at the time. And I feel really bad about it, that I lied to mommy and daddy. She says, when they come up for visiting day, go for a walk with daddy, not mommy. Like, don't do mommy, do daddy, go for a walk with daddy and express yourself. So I remember my father and my mother came up visiting day, and I said, Daddy, can we go for a walk? And he said, sure. And I said, I did a few things and I'd really like to tell you about them because I feel so bad. And I start telling him, and he says, stop. I said, what? He goes, I will always love you and I will always forgive you, no matter what you do in your life, no matter what it is. And there's no need for you to tell me what it is. because I will always love you and I will always forgive you.
Wow.
And I remember, and that moment stuck in my brain. Fast forward, there I am sitting, a new mom's after my first divorce. I had a little baby. I got divorced when my daughter was 5 months old, and I'm sitting with my therapist, and I'm like, stressing about being a single mom and different things like, and I was talking about being a parent and loving my child, and even when the child does something that is you find hurtful or you don't know what to do and you get angry. And she said, "Do you have any role models?" I said, "Yeah, my dad." And I tell her this story, and she said, "And you know what?" She said, "And God is even greater than your father." Can you imagine? God is the super parent. God is the
Right.
super mom and dad. So if your human father tells you he loves you no matter what, and he will forgive you no matter what, can you imagine how God relates to you? And so I go in every Yom Kippur with such a lightness, with such joy for this day. I walk into that synagogue and I start my prayers, and I know I'm talking to a God who loves me no matter what and who will forgive me no matter what. And so
Right.
it's my favorite holiday.
Yeah.
And I think you have such godlike qualities. That's why I
Oh,
say you're a hero. Because it takes so much strength, Gail, for you to do what you do. And you're
I feel very lucky. I'll tell you, Jordana, I feel like I came into this world as a forgiving person. I'm
Mhm.
not a vindictive person. I grew up with a person who's very vindictive. So I do feel lucky. And I want to say, so when I planned the book launch, it's a trifecta. So Yom Kippur is the last of the three. National Daughters Day is September 25th. The book actually becomes live on Amazon on September 27th, which is National Forgiveness Day.
Wow.
So there's National Daughters Day, National Forgiveness Day, and then, of course, our holy holiday of Yom Kippur.
Wow. Beautiful. So beautiful. I can't wait to get the book. I hope everyone really searches it, gets it. It's probably going to be such a light to the world, Gail. Such a gift you're giving the world. And I definitely understand when you say that. People say to me, "Jordana, you're all smiles and you're always positive. What are you doing?" And I say, "This is the way I was born." So I
Yeah.
definitely relate to what you're
Yeah.
saying, that you truly feel that you were born as a forgiving person, but you stayed that way, and you didn't let
Yeah.
yourself get tainted. Yeah.
I have tremendous empathy, so for other people, so that helps me understand them.
Right.
Yeah. So the how do we let your people know the title of the book and when and where and all
Yes,
that
so
stuff?
please tell the title, and also when this is
Okay,
posted, definitely
be
I
on the
could
bottom.
put a
Okay,
yes, but please
and
share with
also
your
they could
friends.
follow us on Instagram. How you found
Yes,
us?
your
Okay,
followers could follow me, and my followers could follow
exactly.
you.
Yes. So it's the book is called "Bullied to Besties: A Daughter's Journey to Forgiveness."
Oh, beautiful.
And if they just look up my name, Gayle Kirschenbaum, Gayle with a Y, gaylekirschenbaum.com, there's a website and they can find information on there. And I have a mailing list and I do whatever. I mean, there's a lot. So the book launch is in New York on a Sunday on Orchard Street, which is where I grew up shopping as a little kid. Believe it or not, it's a bookstore called PT Knitwear. It didn't start that way. And yeah, because mom will be there
Mm,
and Dr. Thompson will be there. And then a few nights later on Wednesday, which is the 8th at 6 a.m., we're doing another one in Bibliotech that you have to register and get a ticket for. It's very shishi. It's
mm.
a bookstore and cafe and wine cellar kind of place on Mercer Street, and that we're having a best-selling author, Amy B. Scher, who's written a lot of books on wellness, and she has healed herself many times over. So she'll be our moderator, and they'll both be great events.
Oh, wow, wow. So the best way to reach you at I think you're saying, is probably your website if people wanted to.
Yeah, go to gaylekirschenbaum.com. So if you put it in there, and then they can subscribe. So when they it comes up as subscription, and I have so many different things we do. So they just click what they want to subscribe to: forgiveness, bullied, both, whatever, there's so much going on. My mom's stuff, which is longevity. But yeah, this is going to be great because they're going to get, two souls here. My mom, who's like the longevity person, who's obviously going to want to talk about our relationship, and me.
That's just so beautiful. Wishing you lots of good luck, Gail. And
Thank you.
thank you again for being a guest here. Really, I feel so honored. Like I said, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for finding us on our Instagram.
My pleasure.
All right. Take care, Jordana. Bye.